say is at a crucial stage. It's not because of foreign wars we wage. It's more to do with the colors blue and red. Too many laws and too much government. Can you tell me where the Constitution went? The Bill of Rights is just hanging by a thread. So many people try to cross the border. Politicians build a new world order. Too many minds are convinced they should be led. I've gotta be free the way God made men. And I won't be ruled by the damn UN. Taking your right to self-defense. They say you're safer but they don't make sense. Dangerous ones will not turn into guns. All the unions always ask for more. All we buy is made on foreign shores. Come a day when there'll be real hell to pay. I've gotta be free the way God made men. And I won't be ruled by the damn UN. Damn UN.
Hello and welcome to today's broadcast of Tap Into the Truth. Hope you're having a fantastic day wherever you are and whatever you may be doing, with all of the usual caveats, of course. With you as always, I'm your ever so humble host, Tim Tapp, coming to you live from historic Roane County, Tennessee. And what a great day to be an American. That's right. Once again, rule of law. Once again, presumption of innocence. Once again, the very notions of fair play. Once again, the very ideology of justice through our justice system stands tall. Once again, baseless accusations no longer run the risk of ruining a person's career and ruining a person's life, despite the best efforts of politically minded and politically motivated individuals. That's right, ladies and gentlemen. Today having been, of course, Saturday, October the 6th, 2018, today marks the most contentious Supreme Court nomination process in the history of the United States. And it came to an end with a resounding strength of character. Brett Kavanaugh refused to be bullied out of the position, and President Donald Trump refused to play politics and kowtow to the wishes of political operatives who only seek to stand in opposition of his agenda. The Democrats cannot allow Donald Trump to be successful because every single day as he continues to win battle after battle with the economy and with all of his foreign policy agendas, everything he does that is successful, that is positive, that is earning respect, and yes, even perhaps a little bit of fear on the world stage. Everything that is going, everything that is taking place, everything that is improving the day-to-day lives of average Americans is a slap in the face of the policies and the agendas of the extremely far-left radical Democratic Party at the national level. The numbers are clear. People who have been tied to the Democratic Party for an extremely long period of time are seeing themselves in a better position financially and socially, thanks in no small part to the, at this point, still relatively short-term policies of Donald J. Trump. A man who is not a politician, a man who is determined to not play politics, who wants simply to do what is best for the country. Now, Democrats will tell you that they want the same thing. We want to do what's best for the country. Yet they still choose to keep everyone divided. They still choose to play identity politics. And I'm sorry, ladies and gentlemen, but as long as we let these people continue to play identity politics, we're going to continue to be this divided nation. We're constantly concerned about the powder keg of what could possibly happen, of how violent this side is going to be and how violent that side is going to be. And it is something we should be concerned about, and I will come back around to that a little bit later. But I want to say, and hopefully someone will convey this to him directly, from me, congratulations, Associate Justice Brett Kavanaugh. Congratulations on becoming the 114th Supreme Court Justice to serve this great republic. Congratulations on standing your ground. Congratulations on standing up to people who wanted to push you aside, who wanted to make false accusations. And I'm talking to you, Mr. Avenatti. People who wanted to jump on the bandwagon and act as if somehow they were also going to be a social justice warrior hero and make false statements and now are facing potential legal consequences for it. And amongst all this, I'm not referring to Dr. Ford. Dr. Ford, I'm afraid Lindsey Graham got this right. I'm afraid Dr. Ford is every bit a victim of the Democrats' political play in this, as was the Kavanaugh family. My heart swelled with pride when I saw Justice Kavanaugh being sworn in and his wife and his two daughters there, because finally there was some part of this process that those two kids could actually take pride in being a part of. They didn't have to be afraid. Now, I intentionally waited on today's broadcast several hours after the confirmation. After the vote, after the swearing in, I waited. Because, quite frankly, I thought some of these less balanced, perhaps dangerously unbalanced members of the resistance would be out protesting and cause some type of issues. Now, of course, there's been protests, but most of them it's been relatively peaceful. Now, I said Friday night on that broadcast that a lot of this would just go away as soon as it was over. Because the Democrats know they lost. They knew they were going to lose from the beginning. They want to keep the base fired up. They want to try and use this as more fodder for the midterm elections. They're still thinking that this is going to fuel that great, big, gigantic blue wave that they are just so hoping against all hope that it will happen. So they keep telling the story, and they keep telling the story, and they keep telling everyone it's coming. They keep saying this because they're hoping that it will manifest. They're hoping that they can make it happen by virtue of simply repeating the story often enough. There's only one way that happens, boys and girls, and let me tell you something. If you are a regular listener to this show, and you listen because you are conservative, and you want more information from the conservative viewpoint, if that's the reason you're here, then listen to me now. If you've never listened to me before, listen to me now. The blue wave is still a possibility, but it's only possible if you stay home. It's only possible if we sit back and let them go to the polls unopposed. Because the terrible, terrible, sad truth that they're unwilling to face, and I've said this several times lately, because it's important that you understand this, the terrible truth that they don't want to face, they refuse to acknowledge, is that there are more of us than there are of them. And when I say more of us, I mean fair-minded Americans who simply want to go about their daily lives without having to worry about simple, basic, fundamental American principles. You know, like due process, like fairness. Now, we know and we understand that we will be the first to admit life is not fair. You should not expect life to be fair. But there is a fundamental difference between something that is not fair and something that is an intentional setup, something that is a gotcha, something that is intended to tear someone down when they don't deserve to be torn down, because they're not even really the target. Make no mistakes. Be under no illusions here. Brett Kavanaugh was only targeted because he was a pick by Donald J. Trump. This was designed to target him. They thought they were close enough to the midterms, and they thought they could play their games, and they wanted to push it. But I still hear about how this is going to affect the courts for decades to come. There's still just a one-vote advantage when you look at the justices that are sitting on the court right now compared to their political ideologies and how they utilize that to make rulings. And the really fun, really awesome, really great part about conservative-minded justices is that they typically don't let political ideologies guide them in how they rule on cases. You cannot say the same thing with the more left-leaning justices, at least not very often. Every now and then you'll see one flip to the other side and say, oh, okay, I'm going to vote this way. But then usually there's some leftist ideology behind why they did it. Never the fact that, oh, well, this is how we should rule on this law based on what the Constitution says. I have yet to hear that. Now, when the left is really going to start losing their minds is when the next opening comes up. Now, we don't know when that's going to be, and I have no ill wish, no nefarious wishes to be sent towards anybody currently serving. But we do know that based on the advanced age of a couple of the justices currently serving, that there's a very realistic opportunity that Donald J. Trump will probably get at least one more pick, even if he doesn't run for re-election, even if he doesn't win re-election if he was to run. He's probably going to get at least one more. And that's going to be the one that will send the leftists through the roof. That's going to be the one that's going to send the leftists to completely and totally losing their minds. Because that'll be the one that will make it a true advantage on the court, hopefully for constitutionally texturist judges, but definitely for justices that tend to lean in a more conservative fashion. Justices that tend to believe that it's the Constitution that should be guiding the court, that it's the Constitution that should be guiding the judicial process from start to finish. And why is that bad news for the leftist? And it's important to understand the definitions. Once again, when I say leftist, I mean leftist. I don't mean just Democrat, because the average Democrat is not really a leftist. They just owe an allegiance currently to leftists. They're not socialists. They're not communists. They're generally Americans, and they generally simply want to believe what their elected officials are telling them about the party. They want to believe that they're there to try and protect minorities and that they're there to look out for the little guy, because they desperately want to believe there is someone that fits that description in politics. Boys and girls, there are, but very, very few of them have a D at the end of their name. But be that as it may, it doesn't really matter. What does matter is the fact that rule of law, presumption of innocence, these basic concepts, they were manifest today, and Justice Brett Kavanaugh will now get to serve. I'm going to take a short break right now, and when we return, we'll continue and pick up right where I left off. Stay with me. All right, ladies and gentlemen, that was, of course, Mr. Matt Fitzgibbon. Tremendous historian. You need to check him out sometime. Great musician. And I want to thank him one more time, as I so often do, for allowing me to use some of his tunes for this broadcast. Thank you, Matt. I do appreciate it. Ladies and gentlemen, please go check out patriotmusic.com whenever you get the opportunity. In fact, if you feel the need to leave the show right now to go do that, go ahead. Just make sure you get back over here pretty quick, because you don't want to miss much more of this. Or you can always check it out in the archives. Yes, that's right. You can find this show in the archives, whether you have to look for it at Spreaker.com or over at blogtalkradio.com, or more likely you can find us at Spotify and iHeartRadio and over at iTunes and at Stitcher.com and TuneIn.com and over at Google Play and at AHA Radio and just about anywhere else you find podcasts. You can find this show after the fact. But I am broadcasting live right at the moment. Internet radio, my definition, is if you broadcast live, that's internet radio. If you simply record and then polish and do all that other stuff, then that's just podcasting. And while there's nothing wrong with just podcasting, I do think that there's an added level of difficulty and challenge to the live broadcast all the time, because let's face facts, if you run into a technical glitch, there you go. Yeah. Anyway, let's get back to this. Again, patriotmusic.com. Check it out. Always new projects ongoing for Matt, and he does have some great merchandise over there as well. patriotmusic.com. Let him know I sent you. It won't get you a discount, but I like for him to know that people are still going there because they hear it here. All right, let's get back to it. I've been saying for a while now, and I'm going to reiterate it again one more time, for all of you leftists who were all part of the hashtag Me Too movement, who just decided you wanted to pile on, that you needed to pile on, that this was about your experience. First of all, let me say that if you've had an experience, if you are the victim of sexual assault, particularly rape, then I can't express enough emotion, enough support to you, no matter what. There's no level, there's nothing that I can't dig deep enough to do anything to help you. But that doesn't mean I'm going to ignore you. It doesn't mean that no one's listening. We were listening. But what you have to understand is that you made this personal, and you projected your experiences onto someone completely different. And I get the argument at the left. I get this picture, the way Brett Kavanaugh has been painted, especially from college campus to college campus, because you guys from high school and into college, you know somebody who's exactly like the picture that was painted. But you see, that's what it was. It was a picture. It was a painting. It was an image. It was a story. It was a narrative. It may be true. But you see, we don't know. I don't know. You don't know. You think you know because, you know guys like that. Because you know the jocks, the popular guys, the good-looking guys who are just jerks and think they can have whatever they want and think there's no consequences. But you see, you're making an assumption. You're assuming that Brett Kavanaugh is just like every single other high school jock jerk that you knew. And the truth of the matter is, you don't know. And I'm willing to guarantee that if you took a poll of the students, fellow students at the time, 36 years ago or plus, who attended school with him in that time period, you would probably get very few people that would say, oh yeah, that Kavanaugh guy was a real jerk. Because we don't tend to really hold on to those high school ideas. It's usually because of a personal incident, whether you decide someone's a jerk. And I promise you, if you have lived long enough, you have come across people that think you are a jerk from something that you did who knows how long ago, when you never had the intention of doing anything negative to them. Now, of course, what does that have to do with this? It has everything to do with it, because it's about perception, it's about image, and it's about understanding who you're talking about. And it's about trying to see through this narrative that's been pushed upon you. See, I'm talking to the college students and the leftist activists right now who are out there, who are actually, as far as the true leftists are concerned, are the useful idiots. People who have legitimately been hurt and who let their emotions lead them and guide them and take them to the actions that we have witnessed since that first allegation was directed at Brett Kavanaugh. I'm talking to you. I know you're probably not listening to the show, but if you come across it or one of your friends shares it, I need for you to try to understand. Take just a few seconds and divorce yourself from your emotion. Divorce yourself from your personal experience and try to look at this situation with none of your baggage attached to it. Because when you do that, and you see this man as someone who has, since college, worked very hard to have a respectable life and have a respectable position in this country. A man who has established himself as a leader in the community. A man who has an impeccable record as a sitting judge as he worked his way up. A man who had been through, previous to this event, 6 FBI background checks. You need to stop and wonder why. Why did Michael Avenatti's accusations just kind of fade away? Why did no one, absolutely no one, take those allegations of the gang raping, ring activity? Why did no one take those seriously? I mean, nobody did. There's still a few hardcore leftists who saw, oh, well, this person is here, and that's another accusation, and they're still clinging to it. But nobody, not the Democrats or the Republicans in the Senate, not the FBI. And do you know why? And I really want you to stop and think about this. Why would we not take that seriously? Because that would be the most damning of all the allegations that were made. I mean, it would be. You want to make a big deal about what happened to Miss Ford? I'm sorry, Dr. Ford? Yeah, that would be pretty bad if what she remembers or claims to remember were true. But it still didn't constitute to the level of rape. Now, that it's still bad enough. Don't get me wrong. I'm not trying to dismiss if that allegation had been true. And I say it in that fashion because there was nothing to support this allegation. And there is actually several reasons to discount it. Several. And if you've listened to other conservative podcasts, if you've listened to other conservative news radio, if you've listened to any other conservative outlet, I'm sure by now they've went down the long list, and we've already talked about the Arizona prosecutor's memo and all this stuff. We went down this road. We've talked about the Wall Street Journal's report that Dr. Ford's friend supposedly said that she was pressured to try and change her testimony when she did not just go ahead and collaborate the testimony of Dr. Ford. But she still wouldn't do it. She wouldn't do it because she wasn't going to be bullied either, because she understood what was on the line. This was a terrible situation. This is the kind of thing that cannot be allowed to happen in this country. If there had been legitimacy to this, you cannot pressure witnesses. It's called witness tampering, and is actually a crime. Had this been a trial, But make no mistakes, there's no delusions here. This was essentially Brett Kavanaugh being put on trial by the Democrats in an effort to waste time. The FBI did not pursue this, not because they didn't want to get to the bottom of things, but because they, on 6 separate occasions before this 7th and final time, already looked into these things, and here's the plain, simple truth. When it comes down to it, 1 or even 2 unreported incidents could very well go under the radar of an FBI background check. But if there was a concerted effort by Brett Kavanaugh and Mr. Judge and a group of friends, or even just acquaintances, to go from party to party, drugging girls and then raping them, eventually somebody would have said something. There is no way at all. And this is speaking as someone who's been interviewed by the FBI for background checks for someone looking to get work at the local national laboratories. There is no way that someone wouldn't have known something and wouldn't have said something. It just would not have happened. If it was any truth to it, the FBI would have already known about it, and he would have never passed the first background check. He would have never gotten to the next level. So when you have so many people looking to just make a name for themselves and looking to be, I am the hero, or, and better yet, in Cory Booker's case, I am Spartacus. When you have these people doing this ridiculousness, you turned it into a circus. I sat and I watched multiple videos of different body language experts watching the testimony from both Dr. Ford and Justice Kavanaugh. I watched a total of 6 of them. 2 of them were very pro Dr. Ford and very anti Justice Kavanaugh. But it became quite clear, if you listened long enough, other statements they made, these folks may have been body language experts, but they were also very politically motivated. When I watched the others, the rest were very, very critical of Dr. Ford. And they were kind of middle of the road. Some were a little pro, some were a little anti. Most of them were kind of indifferent in regards to Justice Kavanaugh. But the one thing that was missing from 3 of those 4 was there were no insinuations. There was nothing that you could pick up on that would make you believe that they were coming from a partisan position as they tried to read the body language. There was the one that did seem very partisan to the conservative side. So if I take out the body language experts in these videos that I watched, if I take out the partisan ones, then it's still quite clear that there's an overwhelming of agreement that Dr. Ford seems to have some issues. In fact, they were so critical, so much of this seems so rehearsed, that there was a legitimate effort to sound meek and even mucusy, as the terminology was used by several. This is the one point where she was holding her chin down and trying to sound. But then as soon as the questions changed, or the next word, she popped up and she was fine. And she kept doing what one of these body language experts kept referring to as pretty pose. I'm trying to be cute, or I'm trying to seem meek, or I'm trying to seem childlike. Because the inclination, the natural instinct in humans is to protect children. So there's this psychological effort to try and step up, to protect. That's why so many people instinctively, just watching without thinking about it, without watching for those efforts to manipulate you, to manipulate your feelings. That's why so many people just thought she was credible in her testimony. That testimony seemed credible. In fact, I even came away thinking not so much that she was necessarily right about Justice Kavanaugh, but I was convinced that something at some point in her life had happened. I just don't think she'd ever gotten to a point where she has dealt with it. So again, let me reach out to you people who are on this quest to crucify Brett Kavanaugh because of your own personal experiences. Brett Kavanaugh did not do that to you. And whoever did, they deserve to be punished to the fullest extent of the law. And if you did not receive justice, then I am so sorry. I really am. I know that doesn't mean much, and it's not a comfort to you, whether you believe me or even if you don't believe me. I would be even less comfort, I would imagine. I know it's not a comfort. I know it doesn't make you feel any better. But for the love of this nation, this is one of those times where you have to set that emotional part of yourself aside, because if you've been a victim of that, you have already seen that if you're not able to move past that and see others out in a different light than just that of a predator, then you're not going to be able to experience a full and complete life. You are isolating yourself. You're boxing yourself in. So keep in mind, this was not an affront to you. This was not an affront to women. This was not some effort to try and say, no, it's women, back to the kitchen, get barefoot, and just wait for me to come impregnate you. It's not a step back to the 1950s. We don't want you staying in the kitchen with your aprons, and we want you to have full, fulfilling lives. I promise you, that's where we're at in America today. You are not going to run into very many conservatives that are going to expect you to just have their slippers and pipe waiting when they get home and tell you to bring them a sandwich. Now, some younger guys, 25 or under, may still expect you to bring them a sandwich, but that's a completely different story. It has nothing to do with political leaning. It has to do with being young and, a little lazy. You've got to be able to see this for what it was, and that is, this is a victory for America. This is a great day for America. Don't be sad. Because again, I offer you this simple idea, something that you need to keep in mind. And I'm talking to all leftists. Now, even if you're a Democrat, if you're a liberal, or if you're an honest-to-goodness socialist, or if you are actually just a hardcore leftist who's out to destroy the republic, you do not want this to become the standard. If you're one of these global elitist leftists that's out to destroy America, maybe you do, because it helps you. You will use this as a tool. Or at least you certainly think you can. And it can become a tool for them, and they will use it that way. And guess what? As soon as they're done coming for everybody like me, then my little slightly left-leaning friends, they will come for you next. They will. Because right now, you are their cannon fodder. You are their foot soldiers. You are the people that are out there trying to put large numbers in front of the camera so the media can pretend like you represent America. And in truth, you are victims. I mean, there seems to be a competition for biggest victimhood, but you are victims, but not of what you think. You're not the victims of a patriarchal society. You're not the victims of systemic racism. You're the victims of the failings of our public school system. You're the victims of indoctrination as opposed to education. You're the victims of people trying to convince you, trying to brainwash you into believing that you can never achieve the actual American dream. In fact, they want to convince you that there's no such thing as the American dream. That the man is going to hold you back, that's going to hold you down, it's going to keep you from advancing. They're going to try and convince you that you don't have a path to individual greatness in this country. There's no path to individual success in this nation. I would refer you to people like Ben Carson, people who grew up in the hood to a single mother, people who made the choice that they were going to educate themselves and they were going to lift themselves up, and now is literally trying to do the same thing for millions of other people. He became the best in his field, a field that is difficult, a field that is scary for most really good doctors. Pediatric, children's brain surgery. You know, there are some simple concepts I throw around here all the time, like liberty. It doesn't require a brain surgeon to get. But you can grow up in the hood with every possible disadvantage in your way, and you still can put your shoulder to the grindstone, and you can earn your way out, and it doesn't have to be through an athletic scholarship. But for the love of God, if you can get one and use that, then do it. You can get out of the hood. You don't have to be a victim. There is nobody keeping you down except for the mentality that leftists want you to embrace. There is opportunity for everyone in this country, but it's up to you to find it, and it's up to you to work for it, and it's going to be hard sometimes. In fact, it may not work out the first time or the second time or the third time, but if you keep going, you can make it, or you can find a better path along the way, because maybe what you're working for in the first place may not be your path. It may just be the path you want. I'm sitting here behind a microphone right now, but at some point in the future, it may come to pass that it just, after years and years of trying to get a larger and larger audience, I may eventually peak and plateau and eventually start dropping off. I may end up being just another failed talk show host. But I know that's where I end up if I just stop, if I just quit, if I just say, oh, well, I've had a setback. You see, I look at the numbers. Now, sometimes I actually don't even look at them every week anymore. I've been doing this long enough now that I like to look at trends now. Now, when I first started, it was like, yeah, let me see the numbers. Oh, this is great. What happened this week? Where'd everybody go for this show? And then sometimes you have these lulls. 2 or 3 months at a time, the numbers will dip down really low compared to where you were. I mean, I'm assuming this happens to a lot of hosts. Maybe it's just me. But I've also seen them go back up. Right now, this show is as popular as it ever has been based on the individual numbers, and it has a lot to do with some of the new outlets that we're available to. New people are finding them. And a lot of the folks who have been listening to are staying. They're not going away. So it's a good thing. And I feel like there's still a possibility of being very successful at some point down the road. But it would have been real easy at this point. It would have been real easy to get discouraged and to even just walk away. Because sometimes it's hard to get behind this microphone and say, what are we going to talk about tonight? For example, this week's Sunday show, my guest is Bruce Dormandy. Not my typical guest. Normally we're talking politics. This is a political show. But every now and then I like to step away. One of the reasons I picked to tap into the truth is so that it would allow me some flexibility. It's usually politics that I really feel the need to get on here and get the most passionate about and talk to you folks. But for the Sunday show, Bruce Dormandy is coming on. He is a journalist that focuses on space science. Something that I actually have an honest interest in, but have not spent a great deal of time in the last several years actually following. So this is an opportunity for me, in my mind, to try and get caught up on some stuff. Now, in order for it to actually still fit the bill, we're going to talk a little bit about the intersection between where politics and space exploration have come into play. We might even talk a little bit about the First Man controversy, that movie. It was a pretty hot topic when it first came along. I haven't heard many folks talking about it much, but I'd like to get his perspective on it since he's been focused on science for a while. I think it'll be a fun and interesting conversation that will be very different than what we normally have. But that's part of the fun of the Sunday afternoon conversation. It doesn't have to fit that profile. And then another great thing about being here. Well, let me wrap back around instead of blowing my own horn here. We live in a nation that is based on some pretty simple, but were groundbreaking at the time, principles and concepts. The notion that we ourselves can be the sovereigns of our nation. The idea that we are the rulers of this country and that we, because we can't all get together and go do this, hire representatives to go do the work for us. We do that through elections. But make no mistake about it, they are hired by us because they get a salary. We choose them, they get the job. We have one of the worst job interview processes for our elected officials. And I will make every indication that we should repeal the 17th Amendment. I think it solves a lot of problems right off the bat. In fact, we probably wouldn't even have to have a constitutional convention, which we're looking still. I'm still heavily pro-convention of the states, by the way. But we wouldn't have to do that if we just repealed the 17th Amendment. Or maybe we need to have the convention of states to repeal the 17th Amendment. Now, it doesn't solve everything, but it goes a long way towards solving two major things. Now, for those of you who aren't necessarily as familiar as you would like to be, let me explain to you the 17th Amendment is the amendment to the Constitution that moved the election of senators out of the hands of being selected by the states and into the hands of the citizens of the states voting. Now, why is that a problem? Why would there ever be an issue with an individual getting to vote for who their senator should be? Well, I mean, in theory, it sounds great, except for the fact that we are not a democracy. We are a constitutionally federated republic. And as such, we had a divided House for a very specific reason. The idea was the House of Representatives would be the House of the people. They'd be the closest to the people. They'd have to have the shortest amount of time for their term of service, so that since it was a shorter time period, they'd have to come back more often. They'd have to spend more time in the district. They would have to keep their constituents happy. And the only way to do that, theoretically, is to represent them well. But then what happens in the Senate? Well, the Senate has the 6-year term. And we have no term limits. There's literally no point in time where we say, oh, well, that's your 37th term, Senator. You're 283 years old. Marvels of modern science keeping you alive. It's great. Glad to have you back. Let's swear you in, and we've got a confirmation hearing to get to. We got nothing like that. So there's a reason for special interests. There's a reason for these lobbyists to cozy up to certain candidates who've figured out the secrets to how to win and keep winning and keep coming back. And the American public seems to be snowed by this. But let's get back to what it solves. Remember I just mentioned those lobbyists? if we repealed the 17th Amendment and the states were back to selecting the senators instead of them being popularly elected, they would change more often. There'd be no need for term limits necessarily. Now, I still wouldn't be opposed to adding term limits, don't get me wrong. I think 2 times around the Senate's probably enough for anybody. I might be willing to compromise to 3, but, you're talking about 18 years. How long do you think a good person can go to the swamp and stay a good person? I have some serious doubts about it. I mean, even the best people are still people, and humans are humans. And temptation is temptation. It's dangerous to expect people to stand up to such things. But it also does this other thing that is all too often ignored, and that means that in order to be a senator, and if you want to be a senator more than one term, then that means you have to keep the state that sent you happy, the state government. And what's the purpose of that? Oh, yeah, it's to protect states' rights. That was the intention of having them separated. The founders and the framers of the Constitution, in their infinite wisdom, knew there would come a day where the federal government would try to completely overrule the states. Despite their best efforts, despite how they wrote the Constitution, despite how they specifically mentioned the fact that within the Bill of Rights, where they specifically said that anything not covered herein is expressly the rights of the people or the states. They wanted states' rights to stay important. That's where repealing the 17th Amendment would come in more handy. Because if your job was to represent the state and the state's interests, not your individual constituencies, but the government of the state so that their rights were maintained, then every single bill that made its way from the House trying to get to the executive's desk would have to be run through the interest and the desires of the state. Now, sometimes that would be a good thing, sometimes that would be a bad thing, but at the end of the day, states still having their rights preserved within this legislation ultimately is a good thing. Because the other side of it is the state government should be more local, should be more right there with the people. See, the people still get to choose who their state representatives are and who their state senators are and who their governor is. They still get to choose that. And so if they send people to the Senate that they didn't like, then they vote in somebody else. And then these other people who come in the office will then replace the previous senator, presumably with somebody more in line with the likings of the people. And you do this because this is how you protect the minorities. Same reason we have the Electoral College. The Electoral College is specifically designed to be a stopgap from direct democracy. And direct democracy is, again, leftists, listen carefully. Liberals, listen carefully. Democratic voters who don't label yourself in any fashion, listen closely. Every time you hear a politician say, our democracy, you need to be concerned. You need to understand the threats and the dangers, the very real dangers of what transpires when you start talking about democracy. Because democracy is essentially mob rule. Democracy by definition means the minorities never win. Democracy means more votes, period, wins. Democracy in its simplest form is two wolves and a sheep getting together to decide what happens for dinner that night. Guess what? It doesn't end well for the minority. So if you're somebody that's still hung up on this and you think that Justice Kavanaugh wants to overturn Roe versus Wade, let me give you a quick lesson on how that works. First and foremost, after he is seated, he sits on this court. There has to be a case mingling, marauding, and snaking its way through the swamp that is the federal court system that could potentially overturn it. Right now, there is no such case. And it's not likely such a case would even be heard at the federal level right now. But let's pretend for a second that case does exist. And let's pretend for a second it manages to get all the way to the Supreme Court. Once it's there, then he will be just one of 9 justices that will have to make a ruling based on the merits of the case that is in front of them, not the merits of Roe versus Wade. Now, you've been led to believe that Justice Kavanaugh is not a man of integrity. You've been led to believe that he's not a man of character. You've been led to believe he doesn't have the right temperament to be a justice on the Supreme Court. All of those are false narratives. You have been lied to by your political handlers, and that's who they are. That is their intention. They are using you. And they're going to use you for the next battle, the next fight, the next thing that is coming down the pike, which I think the next big effort they're probably going to oppose is the Republicans' attempt to try to make the Trump tax cuts permanent. There may be something else that pops up between now, but I think that's probably the next thing. I don't see them doing much in the way of trying to stop the newly negotiated trade deal between Canada and Mexico, basically the new version of NAFTA. They might. I can't promise you. I mean, the resistance, they pick some strange things to resist. But I'm asking those of you that are fair-minded but lean a little to the left to step back from your emotion for just a few minutes and think about this. Think about who's speaking up as a leader for you. Let's take Alyssa Milano, for example. I used to love watching Alyssa Milano. I loved her as a child actor on Who's the Boss. I thoroughly enjoyed watching her on Charmed, and I've seen her in some other things here and there. I can't think of right off back, but I've seen her. I enjoy her as an actress. I think she does a fantastic job, and I think she's done a good job and developed into a great job since those early days of Who's the Boss. I enjoy her as an actress. But as a political pundit, as a philosopher, as a purveyor of simple basic ideology, even a simple communicator, when it comes to her political philosophies, she's not so good. I mean, even the folks over at MSNBC are having a hard time taking her seriously now. Have you seen the footage of her trying to talk about this recent Kavanaugh thing? Did you see it? She was on there and she was asked, but there seems to be a lot of Americans that agree with Donald Trump, because of course they were Trump bashing, which is still all this Kavanaugh thing was. It was a Trump bash palooza. Another reason why so many of the American people saw through it and moved on. But she literally said, well, do they believe him? Do they believe in that? Or is Trump just using kind of this cultish, cult mind control thing on them? And the co-host on the show, literally, she's sitting there for a second, and she's trying to keep a straight face, and she has to look over at the male co-host, who ignores the co-host. And she's got this, oh my God, she's crazy look on her face. When the people at MSNBC have to do that on live television, well, it's a good thing it's captured for posterity and can be easily found on YouTube, because it is hilarious. All right, I guess it's time to take another break. Let me do the. Let me go ahead and do the Edwards Notebook, and then we'll do the Songs and Stories for Soldiers Veterans Tip of the Day, and then we will be right back. Thanks for being with me, and please continue to stay.
The effort to stop Brett Kavanaugh illustrates how low the swamp dwellers will go. Hello, I'm Ron Edwards. On today's page from the Edwards Notebook, the life of Brett Kavanaugh has been one of high achievement from high school until he was tapped by President Trump to be appointed to the U.S. Supreme Court. Kavanaugh was known as Mr. Clean, who has been dragged through the mud of accusations of sexual misconduct. Kavanaugh strongly stated, quote, "This is ridiculous and from the Twilight Zone. Don't know who this is, and this never happened," unquote. The truth is, Judge Kavanaugh is a casualty of a much bigger battle over the heart and soul of the future of the United States of America. For example, Judge Kavanaugh is a strict constitutionalist who believes in the rule of law, reveres our constitutionally limited form of government, and loves God. Those opposed to him are on a mad mission to maintain abortion, undermine the Constitution, maintain open borders, and want to create a permanent, amoral, dependent underclass. And that's just for starters. We must not fall for their tricks, for we have a republic to save. I'm Ron Edwards. Join me Wednesdays at 1 p.m. Pacific, 4 p.m. Eastern, on AmericaMatters.us, SHR Media, and Sunday midnights on Talk America Radio Network.
Ron Edwards, the new voice of America.
Sponsored by the Tri-County Liberty Coalition.
This is Dan Perkins for Songs and Stories for Soldiers.us with your Veterans Tip of the Day. You served your country, you made a difference, and now you have a chance to make a difference once again. Your country needs you to fight one more time. So here's your Veterans Tip of the Day. Next month may be one of the most important midterm elections in our lifetime. You, along with all Americans, are going to be asked if you want to go forward or backwards in America. To be part of the decision, go to the polls and vote. Encourage your fellow vets to vote and your friends to vote. Unless you vote, you can't have a voice. We want to hear from you. The best way to do that is for you to vote. Your vote counts. You don't have to put on the old uniform to fight in this battle. All you have to do is check a box or pull a lever. Go to the polls and show your support for the Constitution and America. The country you may save is your own. This has been Dan Perkins with your Veterans Tip of the Day.
She's like an angel, works for the devil. She counts his money 'cause money comes cold. She becomes your best friend, then never comes back again. I hate her so much, but I cannot let him go. They call us liars, but we're thick as thieves, yeah. They say we're nothing, but nothing's all I see. So they call us liars, but we're thick as thieves, and you are all I really need.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, I am back. Thank you very much for staying with me through that little bit of a break. Let's see, where were we at? Oh, yeah. It's a great day to be an American. It's a great day in America. We have a new Supreme Court justice. But you know what? We still need to understand, like I was trying to allude to earlier, the blue wave is still a possibility, boys and girls. And there's no two ways about it. The blue wave is still a possibility. But there's an answer. We just show up. We show up at the polls. Do not take this victory lap. Now, President Donald Trump, he was in Kansas. He was at another rally. He did a fantastic job whipping up the crowd. He took his victory lap that went along with us, and he was calling out some folks by name. And it was funny. It was. And it worked exactly the way he wanted to, because it got people like Miss Pocahontas to respond on Twitter. And, of course, she responded in a way that allowed a lot of other folks to, well, respond to her. A lot of conservatives are pulling their oats right now, and they should, because this is a victory, and we should feel good about it. But we can't get complacent. We just can't. There's too much on the line. What in the name of all that's holy in heaven would happen if we get complacent, if we think we've already won? We have to show up at the polls. We need to make sure that every one of our conservative friends who's eligible to vote, blah, 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 enunciation's important, who is eligible, see, I can say it, who's eligible to vote, gets registered. I mean, in most places, there's still time. If it's already too late where you're at, then you need to smack them in the back of the head. Say, what were you thinking? You know, Three Stooges style. Obviously, I'm not really calling for you to commit physical violence on anyone, okay? I can hear it now. Tim Top calls for violence. No, I was calling for slapstick comedy. That's what I was calling for. But that's the good news is if we do show up like we should, if we show up with the same passion we had over the Kavanaugh fight, then there will not be a blue wave. There will be a red tsunami. There would be the possibility of going from possibly losing the Senate to gaining more seats in the Senate. There will be the possibility of losing some seats in the House to actually gaining some seats in the House. There might even be the possibility of getting close to a supermajority. There isn't the possibility of actually getting there. I don't think. I haven't looked at the final numbers. There may be some combination there. But we'd be getting closer. Of course, that supermajority doesn't matter that much these days anyway, because thanks to Harry Reid, you know, the nuclear option came along, and there's not a lot of things left that a genuine filibuster can take. But you know what? Here's something else. I mentioned the word filibuster. I really want the Republicans also to understand they need to start holding Democrats' feet to the fire. If they want to filibuster, you need to make them actually do it. And, you know, and the way filibusters are actually supposed to work. Stop just letting them threaten a filibuster and, okay, well, that's as good as. We'll stop. We'll go back at it. Fight. Fight for what's right. Don't be afraid of a government shutdown. Don't be afraid of somebody calling you a name. Don't be afraid to look these people in the eye and tell them that's not how our country works. Don't be afraid to look a protester in the eye and say, you cannot bully me into changing my principles. Look them in the eye and tell them, do you honestly think that your principle is that great of a principle if it tells you, if standing on your principle means that you come and try to bully me? And call these people out, too, for using the wrong label. They're the ones that want to use labels. They need to use the right ones. See, they like it when you call them liberal. Because a classic liberal is someone that most Americans could respect. Most of these people are not liberals. They like that title. They like that name. Because, again, to be liberal means that you believed in free speech, the free exchange of ideas, and you had a natural distrust of the government, so you wanted somebody keeping an eye on the government, making sure they weren't committing crimes and weren't being corrupt. See, a liberal is actually a good person to have around. These leftists, however, these far-left extremists, they believe in silencing free speech. A liberal would be the first person to stand up and tell you, I may disagree with everything you say, but I will fight to the death to preserve your right to say it. today's leftist who's claiming the liberal mantle hides in a safety closet looking for a safe space so they can cry because they've been triggered. The very notion, the very idea, the very concept that they might eventually face some type of idea or philosophy that threatens their worldview shakes them to their very core. You might as well stab them in the neck. You'll get the same adrenaline rush from the same fear in their eyes. Oh no, this is a different idea, and this idea, it seems to make sense from a point of view. I've got to figure it out. Boom. Their mind is blown. I just have a feeling that all this imagery, I'm still going to get accused of calling for violence. I'm not calling for violence. In fact, quite the opposite. Once again, I'd like to appeal to protesters and people that lean slightly to the left. I know the actual leftists aren't going to be listening. Even if they do hear this, they won't listen. They're not going to be swayed. Persuasion is not something that... It is only their ideas that matter. So I know it's not going to matter. But there are folks, there are people out there that are legitimately victims of the leftist propaganda, victims of indoctrination. These people can still be saved. We simply have to help them to learn a very, very important skill in life, and that's critical thinking. Once you become a critical thinker, it's very easy to see through the leftist BS. That's where we have to go. That's where we have to get to. Period. It can be done. It should be done. It should be easy to be done. So let's get there. When you hear somebody trying to tell you to join Antifa, tell them, no. Come on, don't you want to make a difference? Don't you want to help? Yeah, I'd love to make a difference, but I think I would like to take a lawful method, because that's the only thing that actually makes a change. You know, there's a difference between civil disobedience and just being in a riot. There's a difference between what Martin Luther King Jr. did and taking a bike chain and hitting somebody with it. I would really love for some of you folks who aren't so far gone as to just be full of the Kool-Aid and unwilling to listen to someone like myself, I'd love for you to take a few minutes and honestly think what some of your historical heroes would have to say about the current state of politics in America, particularly politics on the left. First, you need to take a look at who your heroes are. And you need to ask yourself, are those people worthy of being heroes? If you have Margaret Sanger on your list, you probably are a white supremacist. She was. She was a eugenicist who wanted to get rid of blacks and other undesirables. That's quote from one of her speeches. Those are her very words. That's not me making it up, and it's not revisionist history. It's from honest to goodness recordings. She's out there. That was her, Margaret Sanger. Founder of Planned Parenthood, biggest abortion provider in the country, probably the world. Margaret Sanger should not be a hero if you believe in protecting minorities. It doesn't matter what your feelings about abortion are. If you believe in protecting minorities, Margaret Sanger targeted black people in America. She did. And she also would have been perfectly content with the elimination of a few other folks that are on your list of intersectionality. That's who she was. Malcolm X. Is Malcolm X on your list? Malcolm X believed in violence. until he didn't. Before he was killed, most likely under direct order of Louis Farrakhan. He's done everything but admit it. Till he was murdered by the Nation of Islam. Malcolm X, he was a strong proponent for revolution, a violent revolution. But then he had a change of heart. He realized that violence begets violence. He realized that if he really wanted to make a change, that Martin Luther King Jr. was right all along. And let's talk about MLK. Is MLK on your list? Is he one of your social justice warrior heroes? What would he think about you joining Black Lives Matter or Antifa? Because as long as you say a peep about violence, I promise you he would not condone it. Not publicly, not privately. Who else you got? Take a real look at them. Look at their background. And don't just use one-sided background checks. Take a hard look at your so-called heroes. Take a hard look at the people that you're holding up as the example that you want to emulate. If you do that, then you've got a pretty good picture of who you really are, or at least who you want to be. If one of your heroes is JFK, then he wants you to go out and make a difference, but he wants you to do it within the bounds of the system. You've got to figure out what your priorities are. You've got to figure out what your principles are. You've got to figure out who you want to be and what are the true changes you want to make happen in the world. And then you need to dig to the bottom of why you want that change, who stands to benefit, and are you being told the truth about it? And don't just settle for what someone tells you. Do real research. Use multiple sources. Don't just take my word for it, as I say at the end of every show. Really know what you know. Don't just blindly follow. So whether you like it or not, you friendly little leftist, you, this is a great day for America, and it's a great day for all Americans, yourselves included. Due process lives for at least another day. The rule of law lives for another day. And there should be fallout from the folks who were making false accusations. These false allegations against Kavanaugh, they should be prosecuted. Now, some of you simply don't want to admit the fact that there were false accusations made along the way, but boys and girls, there were several. There was a man in New Hampshire who literally claimed to have beat up Kavanaugh and Mr. Judge because they were supposedly harassing one of his friends on a ferry. He tried to bring that to the attention of his senator, Mr. Whitehouse. The man who, during his questioning of Kavanaugh, wanted to talk about fart jokes in high school. That was riveting. Yeah, he was big and bad, and he beat the crap out of these two for harassing his friend until the FBI showed up to actually look into it. Guess what they found? Oh yeah, he was lying. He recanted his story and he apologized publicly. There should be more repercussions than that. But his motivation was to be a social justice warrior hero. His motivation was to believe survivors. At the end of the day, what none of you seem to have understood is that there was absolutely zero proof and no real reason to believe that Dr. Ford was a victim of Brett Kavanaugh. The inconsistencies in her own story are enough to make you seriously question whether the event happened. The fact that the 4 people that she named that were there at this party either couldn't remember or completely refuted it by saying it wasn't there, including her longtime friend, that should give you pause, if nothing else. The fact that this friend later said that she was pressured by Dr. Ford's attorneys and people who worked for the Democratic Party to try and change her testimony to become collaborative, that's a bad thing, but let's ignore that. The fact that it's the same friend who also was coached by Dr. Ford in how to take and pass a polygraph test, something that she directly lied about under oath during her testimony. Oh no, I've never done that. She said that. She changed the time frame of the events because the time frame she initially said would have had Kavanaugh off to college. He would not have been in town to do it. And it wasn't until after serious conferences with her attorneys and Democratic operatives that she made this change. Now, again, I came away feeling like, yes, there's probably something that happened to this woman, but I don't think it had anything to do with Brett Kavanaugh. But that's just what I think. I don't know. But you know what? If we were to find out later that it was all true, if we were to find out, if there was suddenly proof, evidence that Brett Kavanaugh was this horrible, horrible sexual predator, then you know what would happen? Conservatives would stand up and demand his impeachment from the bench. Right now, we already have Democrats saying they're going to impeach Kavanaugh. Still not quite sure about what it is they think their grounds for impeachment are. Oh, some of them are saying, well, he lied under oath. Yet, what they claim to be lies are things they cannot prove one way or the other. He lacks the temperament. Guess what? Lacking the temperament is not grounds for impeachment. Especially when your basis for making the claim of him lacking the temperament is the fact that he defended himself and his family from accusations that are rather harsh, rather cruel when it comes to the fallback on the family. And if they are completely unfounded, or even worse, completely untrue, I think he has every right. I did not see a man who expressed great anger. I saw a man who had some righteous indignation. And I got to tell you, he was way more constrained than I would have been under the same circumstances. You had some senators whining that he didn't show them proper respect. What respect did they show him? At the end of the day, they need to realize that, yes, this is a job interview. That's their excuse for playing this political game. We're simply trying to see how you handle this. Really? You've got a huge chunk of the American public who want to believe you are the good guys. Cory Booker, Kamala Harris. Who want to believe that you are the good guys. Believing this narrative, this false image of what you have portrayed Brett Kavanaugh to be. And there seems to be an incredible lack of even basic understanding of the fact that even if he was a jerk in high school, which really seems to be the biggest accusation that was made, that seems the even remotely closest thing to maybe being true, that's not a crime. And it's not something that should prevent you from sitting on the Supreme Court. It's not something that should prevent you from becoming the chief executive of our federal government. It's not even something that should prevent you from becoming a senator or a congressman. Now, it should have great bearing if you're still a jerk today. But the very nature of every single thing... Dr. Ford has already said that she's no longer going to pursue anything. She's done. It's not because she feels defeated. It's because she knows what every single member of that Senate Judiciary Committee knew before they leaked her letter in the first place. And that is, there is nothing prosecutable about this story. You try to take this thing to court, and it gets tossed with prejudice without even much of a hearing because there's no evidence at all. And there's inconsistency in the claims of the accuser. Due process, rule of law. It's great to be an American. I wish other people in other countries had these same principles as part of their justice system. I wish they had true freedom of expression and freedom of speech preserved in their founding documents and the documents that govern their governments. I wish it's something we could spread and share with the world because, yes, guilty people will get away with crimes because of it, but there is still no better system in the world. Because it prevents you as an innocent person from just being blindly accused and being railroaded. Or at least it's supposed to. Again, the system isn't perfect. Sometimes innocent people do go. And do you know why sometimes innocent people go away? Usually because of eyewitnesses that people just believed. So no, it doesn't matter if you believe her or not. It doesn't matter if you believe survivors or not. What matters is facts. And facts don't care about your feelings. You should want to keep your feelings out of making decisions along these lines, and you should want emotions to be taken out of any kind of proceeding like this, because someday it could be you in that hot seat, or someone you care about, someone you love, someone that you do not want to struggle, someone you do not want to see dragged through the mud and possibly face jail time, to lose job opportunities, to lose out on a lifelong dream, just because somebody else decided that they were going to scream at Sarah Good outside of the courthouse in Salem. That's what you guys let this become. Still talking to the protesters. That's what the Democrats tried to turn this into. 12-year-old girls sitting around in a circle saying that I saw Brett Kavanaugh in league with the devil. Pointing and faking a faint and falling down and flopping around like a fish on the floor. It's a frickin' Salem witch trials. Which also demonstrates why just having simple corroborative witnesses doesn't always mean that much anyway. But there's not a single witness that could corroborate Dr. Ford's story. And there were no witnesses that actually were corroborating Miss Ramirez's story. Who actually, much like Dr. Ford, initially had to be convinced by her lawyers that it was actually Brett Kavanaugh who did it. If you had a great memory of this seared into your brain like that, why would you need so much convincing? Tell me why. But it's done now. Kavanaugh has crossed the finish line. He's been sworn in. He is an Associate Justice of the United States Supreme Court. And God bless him. Now, for better or for worse, it's time to get on with the business of actually doing what the court is supposed to do. Again, if you're conservative and you feel like this is a major victory, you're right. And it's okay to celebrate it. But remember, we got to get right back to work, boys and girls, because the left's not going to sit back and wait. They're already looking for their next fight. They've already got their next plan, and they're already getting prepared for the next Supreme Court battle because they know chances are Trump gets at least one more, maybe two. Could you imagine that? 2 more Trump picks on the Supreme Court? It wouldn't matter if the next president was a Democrat and tried to completely undo every good thing Donald Trump's done. That's something he wouldn't be able to undo. Trump's legacy lasts for a generation. Now, if you're on board the Trump train, that has got to sound awful dadgum good to you. If you just love America, you have to kind of think right now that seems like a pretty good thing. So let's get back to the conservative side of things for a little bit. Let's actually spend some time celebrating this. This is a great day. You know, we take for granted the freedoms and the liberties that we have in this country, and we've taken them for granted for so long that there are so many people that live in this country that don't even believe they have them, that are willing to trade them away in exchange for the false promises of fake comfort and fake security. But if you believe in the Declaration of Independence and all the principles laid out there, if you believe that the United States Constitution is one of the greatest documents ever written and that it was in fact divinely inspired like I do, then today is a day that you can't help but rejoice, that you can't help but feel happy about, because it's a phenomenal day. Brett Kavanaugh is a Supreme Court justice now, as he should have been 3 weeks ago. So we're in good position now. The court is ready to operate and function the way it's supposed to, and the leftists have to deal with yet another loss. And I, for one, thank all the powers that be that they still can't quite figure out why they're losing, even though people like myself have been pointing out exactly why all along. It's them. Hey, you guys, if any of you are listening, just a little helpful hint. You're the reason you keep losing. You keep treating the American public like we're a bunch of morons. You keep treating the American public like we should just go along with whatever. You keep treating us like every single penny we have, every penny we earn is actually yours, and we should just be glad you let us keep any of it. And as long as you continue to behave that way, more and more Americans are going to wake up to the truth. And as long as Donald J. Trump is president and he continues to have the successes that he's having, the economy continues to improve, more people are being pulled out of poverty, more people of color are in better positions economically than they have been in decades, then guess what? They're going to start moving away from the Democratic Party. Real soon, we're actually going to get that very ugly picture of the establishment Democrats and the new wave social Democrats, the Democratic Socialists. They're going to battle it out for control of the Democratic Party, and I hope the Democratic Socialists win, because then that will effectively end the Democratic Party once and for all. That would be a... Now, I'm not predicting that's going to happen anytime soon, but I am saying that would be a phenomenal thing to happen, because it would be the beginning of the end. And what a glorious blaze of fire and brimstone that would be. But again, I want to remind you, do not become so complacent as to think that we have already won the war. We got to show up for the midterms. We've got to continue to fight the fight. Trump tax breaks should become permanent. Let's make it happen. The restructured, renegotiated NAFTA needs to be the law. Let's make it happen. Continuation of trade wars with China. Well, China is a bad actor, and they still need us way more than we need them. So let's keep at it until they're willing to come back and say, "We are sorry." When will that be? Why would that be? Maybe a little ways down the road yet. And there may be a little pain involved with it, but the correction at the other end of it would be worth it. It just would. Trust me. All right, going to take one more quick break. Going to play a little more Matt Fitzgibbons. And then after that, we're going to head down the home stretch. So stay with me. I will be right back. Thanks for listening.
We built a promise on a dream, like nothing else the world has seen. We built a promise on a dream. We built a promise, we 13. We crossed the land bridge across the ocean a long, long time ago. We tracked the herds here, we followed fortune on the glacial ice and snow. We came as sailors searching for adventure. We came in from the east. We crossed the ocean, we followed fortune, and our numbers they increased. Before those people stepped onto the shore, 2/3 of the first ones to die. 'Cause along with the trade goods, they brought new disease, the worst way that cultures collide. We built a promise on a dream, like nothing else the world has seen. We built a promise on a dream. We built a promise, we 13. We love the freedom that we created, but the king saw place that calls, where people are desperate to be. We still follow fortune to build a new world, 'cause this is the land of the free. We built a promise on a dream, like nothing else the world has seen. We built a promise on a dream. We built a promise, we 13. We built a promise on a dream, like nothing else the world has seen. We built a promise on a dream, like nothing else the world has seen. We built a promise on a dream. We built a promise on a dream.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, that is Mr. Matt Fitzgibbon, and another great tune from there. Please spend a little time, whenever you get a chance, go on over to patriotmusic.com. That's patriotmusic.com. And be sure to spend a little time, look at the merchandise, check out the latest projects, and he's always working on new stuff. And if you've been there before, come back, check it out again. There may be something new since last you were there. And I'm pretty sure it'd be worth your efforts. If you haven't been yet, I promise you'll enjoy what you find there, and you'll find it's worthwhile. If you do make a purchase, please let Matt know that you heard about PatriotMusic.com right here on Tap Into the Truth. Tell him Tim Tap sent you. For those of you who are listening to KYAH 540 AM, I want to thank you guys for joining me as I bring a little East Tennessee flavor to Utah's Talk Authority. I certainly appreciate you guys listening there on terrestrial radio. And I also greatly appreciate everybody who checks out the show in archives, who's listening at Spotify and iHeart and iTunes and Google Play and AHA Radio and Stitcher.com and TuneIn.com and all the bajillion other places you can find the show. Thanks for listening. I really, really appreciate it. And as much as I hate to say it, I could use some help. If you guys enjoy the show enough that you'd like to maybe kick $1 or $2 this way, I would appreciate it. You can go to tapintothetruth.com. And there are links to make contributions. They're not tax exempt. I'm not a charity, unfortunately, so I can't offer you any tax exemptions. So it would have to be strictly out of the kindness of your hearts or out of your belief in the message, and hoping that I can continue to upgrade the show, upgrade the studio, and bring you better programming and continue to garner yet a larger audience and, you know, continue to do the hard work of trying to help protect and save our republic from the dastardly globalist, eugenicist, leftists that are out there trying to destroy the world so they can remake it in their own image. You know, just a few bucks on your way out the door. Just a tip, if you will. I really do hate to say as much, but I really could use the help. At any rate, let's get back to the show. We're in the home stretch now. There's just a little while left in this 2-hour format. So, let's talk about a few things. Let's talk about how Orrin Hatch is just so cool. How many of you guys saw the video of Orrin Hatch? All right, the protesters trying to scream at him when he was trying to get on an elevator, and they're like, "Why won't you look at us? Why don't you have the courage to look us in the eye?" And he just kind of waves them off. "Oh, how dare you wave your hand? We wave our hand at you." Well, that's A brilliant comeback there, ma'am. I see you have a very sharp and cunning intellect. Oh, but it gets better. For those of you who haven't seen it, it's great. And it's worth looking up. You can find it on YouTube, and it's still being shared quite liberally on almost every social media platform. So feel free to check that out. Everything from Facebook to Twitter to Hubbook to TeaPartyCommunity.com to Gab. Get out there and find it if you haven't seen it. But it gets better. For those of you who haven't, I'll tell you what makes it worthwhile is he does the little way, just this little kind of a whatever hand motion. And they just, oh, how dare you? And as they're screaming that, he has a reaction very much like I think I would have had. It's like, when you grow up, we can talk. I mean, that was, when we grow up, oh, how dare you talk to us that way? And he's behind security people at this point, and he just, as he's expecting the door to start closing, he does this little bye-bye wave over the shoulder of one of the guys. It is hilarious. In a lot of ways, Orrin Hatch has essentially become the Walter Matthau of the Senate. If you've ever seen his performance in Grumpy Old Men and then Grumpier Old Men, that is Walter Matthau. Just a bye-bye wave. It's like, okay, see you later, bye. Keep screaming, I'm leaving now. And it's hilarious. But what's really great to me is they're trying to stop the elevator from closing, right? So security's like, ma'am, if you can't keep the door open, you will be arrested. And as soon as it's there, you will be arrested. They're like, okay. It's just great. I love it. It's just, if you haven't seen it, you really, really need to see this video. It's hilarious. But what makes it great is just the bye-bye wave. I mean, that is just, it's too much. So anyway, Utah, you guys have done a really good job at sending senators to the Senate. You have. I'm proud of you. I wish Arizona was as good as Utah is. So again, you guys listening to KYAH 540 AM, I applaud you in your selection of senators. You guys have done a good job. At any rate, freedom is something that we do take for granted, and we need to express. We need to try to vocal, because some of these people we can still reach. I know I keep telling you this, and it probably seems a little too Pollyanna-ish for a lot of you. And there are times when you just want to just say, "That's it. I'm tired of trying. I'm just going to become the bomb thrower. I'm going to become the snarky little Twitter keyboard warrior. I'm just going to try and napalm everybody." But that approach doesn't really help, because, again, a lot of the people that we're trying to... What's a good word here? A lot of the people that we're trying to get to see reason, I guess is a good way of putting it, they're simply experiencing a glorious lack of life experience. I mean, there's a reason why typically the younger you are, the more liberal you tend to be as far as how you see the world and the way you think. And again, I'm using the word liberal in its proper context, in its classical context. And unfortunately, more liberal-minded people can be pulled to the dark side by people like spooky dude George Soros. Come with me, young one, and together we'll rule the world. Okay, spooky dude, I'm with you. As long as we can stop those mean old Republicans over there. And you'll notice they always think the Republicans are the enemy. There's no real acknowledgement that there are some progressives, air quotes there around the word progressive. Air quotes work really well on the radio, by the way. That's why I have to say they're there. So air quotes around the word progressive. They really don't like to acknowledge the fact that there are progressives in the Republican Party. There are people that have an R at the end of their name that think bigger government is the answer. There are people with an R at the end of their name that thinks there's no consequences for heavy taxation and higher spending. We refer to some of these folks as rhinos, meaning a Republican in name only, but there's some of them that still are flying under the radar, and we don't really call them much of anything. We need to be aware that the mantle of progressivism that they've claimed, also just like when I'm talking about the uber leftists, they love to be called progressive because there was a point in time in American politics where everybody wanted to be progressive. We're moving forward. We're moving into the future. We're leaving the past behind us. And that was the idea, being progressive. But they've twisted that too, haven't they? Boys and girls, young men and women of America who tend to lean to the left and who want to vote and support Democrats, you're being lied to. They use words like liberal and progressive to try and make you believe that they are for the future. But the people that are hiding behind those labels, they're using you in an effort to destroy our republic. They're using you in an effort to dismantle our Constitution. Because once our Constitution is gone, you have no protections from the government. Our founders, the framers of our nation, they acknowledged a fundamental truth that our rights are granted by God, not by government. And they acknowledged the basic truth that our government should be established for the sole purpose of protecting those rights on our behalf. They did these things without question and without doubt, with no compunction whatsoever, the fact that it would be a struggle to keep it. There are some truths out there that every college professor doesn't want you to know, and that's that the founders and the framers, they fought tooth and nail over every letter, every comma, every period, and they fought for the ideas of federalism over confederacy. They fought with the ideas of how far they should be taking the freedom. And they all acknowledged the fact that slavery was a doomed practice in this nation the minute we established our belief in individual liberty. But it was a question of when to fight that battle. Could not afford to have the very young nation split down the middle so early on, with both France and Britain still wanting to come back and get a rematch in Britain's case, and France would have loved an opportunity to peel off some southern states. It's one of the reasons why they helped us. Because they were interested in what would happen after. That and the fact they didn't like the British Crown at the time. These men risked everything so that we could live in a society that was free, so that we could live in a society that would permit the very notion that minorities would not only have a voice, but if they had a good enough point, they could still win, even as a minority. That's why they decided on a republic. That's why they instituted things like the Electoral College. I heard a lot of Democrats whining. It's time to get rid of the Electoral College. Hillary Clinton won the popular vote. Yes, she won the popular vote because there was a few places that have so many people jam-packed. But let me ask you something about these places. You know, I've been talking a lot to the folks that lean just a little to the left tonight. I don't normally spend this much time talking to them. Normally, this is a show about conservatism for conservatives. But this is a show that you should share with your leftist friends and ask them some of the same questions I'm asking. Or if you're listening and they're not going to listen to me, but they will listen to you, ask them some of these things too. Ask them what cities like Detroit and New Orleans and Chicago have in common. Now, they're going to talk about crime rates and gun violence. They're going to talk about poverty levels. And that's when you should also ask them, who's been in charge of those cities for decades? In the case of places like Detroit and Chicago, getting close to centuries. Who's been in control? What political party has been in control? Completely instituted their policies, instituted their great master plan to protect the minorities, to protect and help the poor. How well are those policies working? And then take a look at the national numbers since Donald Trump has been able to fight past the Democrats, fight past the media, and fight past the establishment Republicans to institute the few policies he's been able to institute. It's clear. It's very clear. Democratic policies, leftist policies, they're not designed to help the poor. They're designed to make you more poor. They're designed to keep you under their thumb, and they're designed to keep you undereducated, underemployed, under their thumb. I'll say it again. Isn't it time you stopped falling for that? Isn't it time that you took a long, hard look at the policies that have worked and compare them to the policies that have failed? Look at it from city by city. Look at it by state. Look at simple things like what gun ownership per capita means from one community to the next. Stop and look at what it means gun violence within the cities that have the strictest gun control laws in comparison to areas where gun ownership is mandated. Ask yourself why the numbers bear out the same information. Ask yourself, could it possibly be an anomaly if it continues to be the... Because if it's an anomaly, then over time it will correct itself. But in places that are run by Democrats, they continue to be run into the ground. The only time I have ever seen a city that has done well under Democratic leadership has been because the city has had Republican leadership before that, and the Democrats have yet to have enough time to undo the good the Republicans did. Now, again, college students out there, if you're easily triggered, you might want to put something in your ear, because this is about to get scary. Capitalism is good. Capitalism is good. Welfare is bad. And again, no conservative honestly has a real issue with a safety net for someone who actually needs it. The problem is there's too many people that have convinced themselves they need it when they don't. And there is no better welfare program for a person as far as their self-worth is concerned and as far as the image and the lessons they teach their children than a job, an honest job, one that will provide and allow for upward mobility. That's what's awesome. All right, ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to have to leave it there tonight. I'm obviously running out of time, but thanks, everybody, once again for listening. I certainly appreciate it. And one more time, congratulations, Justice Kavanaugh. That's going to be it. I'm going to go out tonight playing a song from my friend Cash Eslow. I want to thank Cash also for giving me permission to use this song. This is a miracle because it kind of feels like we had one today. Thanks, and remember, don't take my word for it. Definitely don't take their word for it. Be prepared to put in some effort and to use your brain if you really want to tap into the truth. Good night, everybody.
I'm looking for a miracle. Looking for a miracle. Angel looking over me. Just a breath of hope to see. I'm looking for a miracle. Looking for a miracle.